Marvin Gaye fell in the very house where he once learned to dream, ending a brilliant career in the most devastating moment of his life. But behind that instant lies another story. Who truly understood him? What love? What secret? What silence led him to this fate? To find the truth, we must go back to the beginning. Before Marvin Gaye became the voice of a generation, he was just a boy growing up in a house where silence carried more weight than comfort. And before Anna Gordy became the elegant figure standing beside him, she had already lived an entire life shaped by ambition, discipline, and the power structures of a rising Black America. Two origins, two storms, two souls forming in opposite skies. Marvin Gaye Jr. was born in Washington, D.C. in 1939, inside a home ruled by strict rules and emotional coldness. His family lived modestly, but the true weight he carried did not come from poverty. It came from the emotional distance inside the walls of their small house. His father, a minister, expected perfection. His mother held the household together with quiet strength. Marvin, sensitive and deeply perceptive, absorbed every shift in the air, every pause, every tone, every moment when approval felt just out of reach. He discovered music early. The church choir became the first stage where his voice mattered. But even that place, filled with song and community, carried pressure. Marvin sang not because he felt free, but because he hoped it would earn affection he rarely received. In those early years, something inside him formed, a hunger to be seen, to be heard, to be loved. It was a longing that would follow him onto every stage, into every lyric, and into every relationship of his adult life. His childhood taught him two things. A carried the wound. A grew up learning love through fear, not comfort. That wound would later become part of his genius and his undoing. While Marvin's world was shaped by emotional uncertainty, Anna Gordy grew up inside a completely different universe. Born in 1922, she was part of the Gordy family, a name that would soon define Black entrepreneurship in Detroit. Her childhood was not defined by fear, but by ambition. The Gordys encouraged business-minded thinking, self-discipline, and self-belief. Detroit, booming with opportunity from the auto industry, shaped Anna's worldview. Success was not only possible, it was expected. Anna moved through the world with quiet determination. After high school, she went to California, searching for independence long before women commonly lived on their own. She tasted freedom, returned to Detroit, and dove headfirst into the music business with her sister Gwen. She learned contracts, negotiations, talent scouting, and promotion. She watched how power moved through rooms, and she learned how to hold her own within it. By the time Marvin was still dreaming about becoming a singer, Anna had already co-founded her own record label, navigated major industry players, and built a reputation as someone who made things happen. She understood the business of music in a way few women of her time could. She entered rooms where she wasn't always welcomed, but she left every room respected. Her world taught her two things. B carried the power. B learned to guard herself from love, not rely on it. Where Marvin sought protection, Anna learned to protect herself. From opposite sides of the country, their futures were forming like two fronts of a storm. Marvin's sensitivity, shaped by longing and emotional hunger, made him crave affection with an intensity that could overwhelm him. Anna's strength, formed by ambition and self-reliance, made her cautious, observant, hesitant to surrender control to anyone. The timing of their births, 17 years apart, placed them in two different eras of American identity. Marvin came of age during the turbulence of post-war America, when dreams often collided with harsh realities. Anna matured during a period when Black families were building new legacies through business and artistry. Their personalities grew like inverse reflections of each other. He searched for love. She learned to survive without depending on it. He moved with emotion. She moved with strategy. He wanted to be held. She wanted to stand firm. And yet, destiny has a way of pushing opposite energies together. By the late 1950s, Motown was rising. Detroit was transforming into the heartbeat of Black culture and music. Thousands of young men like Marvin traveled there, hoping to find a stage. Meanwhile, women like Anna were already inside the industry, shaping sounds, pushing artists forward, and quietly writing the blueprint for the music that would soon define a generation. If Marvin was the fragile soul longing for recognition, Anna was the polished mind navigating the machinery of fame. They did not grow up together. They did not share the same world. They were not meant, in any traditional sense, to collide. And yet, the emotional architecture built during their early years made their meeting inevitable. Marvin's voice rose out of longing. Anna's presence rose out of survival. Two storms growing separately, one fueled by wounds, the other fortified by power. They were heading toward each other long before they ever stood in the same room. Because some people meet for reasons deeper than timing. Some souls collide because their opposites complete a pattern neither can escape. And to understand everything that came later, the love, the music, the fractures, the betrayals, the silence. We must begin here, in the two origins that shaped them long before they ever touched. Their lives were already moving toward each other, but the moment they finally met did not happen under bright lights or on a concert stage. It happened in a house, Berry Gordy's house, the center of early Motown, a place buzzing with ambition, ideas, and the scent of a new era forming. It was 1959. Detroit was alive with possibility. Musicians drifted in and out of Berry's living room like restless comets, hoping for orbit. Marvin Gaye, 20 years old, shy but eager, had just arrived with the doo-wop group Harvey and the New Moonglows. The group had been invited to perform, and Marvin, nervous, hopeful, carrying the softness of someone still searching for a home, stood near the back, waiting for his moment. That was when he saw her. Anna Gordy, 37, elegant, self-possessed, wearing the quiet confidence of a woman who had already lived several lives, while the young man staring at her was just beginning his first. The room seemed to bend slightly, as if tilting the two of them toward each other. Marvin watched her from across the crowd, his heartbeat caught somewhere between admiration and disbelief. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, older, composed, stylish, a woman who commanded attention without raising her voice. Their first exchange was small. A glance, a polite smile. But something passed between them, something electric, something neither of them could fully name. Marvin approached her slowly, guided by instinct rather than courage. His voice trembled just enough to reveal his youth, but his charm, soft, wounded, earnest, was unmistakable. He wanted her to see him, not just as a singer passing through Motown's doors, but as a man with depth, longing, and imagination. Anna noticed immediately. She had spent years reading artists like open books. Marvin was different. His eyes carried both sadness and hope. His demeanor carried both gentleness and ambition. The age gap, the social gap, the career gap, none of it mattered in that moment. What Marvin felt was instant. What Anna felt was surprising. She had not expected to be drawn to someone so young, so unguarded. She had built her life on discipline and boundaries. Yet here was a man who disarmed her without trying. Their conversations began as light exchanges, music, Detroit, Motown's future. But each word, each shared thought, pulled them closer. Anna saw a sensitive soul who needed guidance. Marvin saw a powerful woman who made him feel safe. Two currents from opposite directions locked together. But outside that house, objections formed quickly. Berry Gordy, protective and strategic, questioned the relationship before it even existed. Friends whispered behind closed doors. Motown staff exchanged looks. A 20-year-old with a dream and a suitcase, falling for a woman almost 2 decades older? For some, it looked reckless. For others, opportunistic. But the two people at the center of the storm didn't care. What began as curiosity soon grew sharper, brighter, more consuming. They began seeing each other often, private dinners, long talks, quiet drives. With Marvin, Anna felt a kind of emotional honesty she hadn't known in years. With Anna, Marvin felt seen, perhaps for the first time. The early days of their love were vivid, beautiful, creative, a world built only for two. Marvin wrote constantly, lyrics that echoed his admiration, melodies that carried her presence. Anna became his muse and, in many ways, his anchor. She steadied him in ways he didn't yet understand. She questioned him, pushed him, convinced him that he was capable of greatness long before the world agreed. But love built on longing carries its own fragility. Their differences, which once felt magnetic, soon carried a quiet tension. Marvin's sensitivity made him need reassurance. Anna's independence made her hesitate to give too much. Marvin wanted closeness. Anna valued space. He lived through feeling. She lived through instinct and strategy. Still, they were drawn together again and again, as if trying to prove something to themselves. That two people shaped by such different pasts could form a single, unified future. Meanwhile, the outside world continued to resist, very worried about the optics. Motown executives murmured about distractions. Friends wondered if Marvin was seeking more than love, if he was seeking a shortcut through the Gordy name. But Anna defended him, and Marvin held on. Their bond was too intense, too immediate, too fated to abandon. They created a world where only their voices mattered. And yet, even in those first golden months, small cracks formed. Little moments of hesitation, quiet misreadings, unspoken questions. Marvin struggled with the old wounds he had carried since childhood, the desire to be chosen, to be embraced fully. Anna, accustomed to strength and independence, sometimes pulled back, unsure how much of herself she could safely give. Their conversations, once effortless, occasionally snagged on misunderstandings. But the passion that fueled their relationship always pulled them through. They fought. They reconciled. They fell harder. They moved toward marriage not because they solved their differences, but because they believed love would overcome them. Looking back, it's clear. They were two souls running toward each other with extraordinary speed, carrying entire histories behind them. He carried longing. She carried caution. He reached out. She held her breath. A meeting that looked unlikely on paper became inevitable in life. Because when two storms meet, they don't soften. They merge. And in merging, they create a force beautiful enough to change both lives, and powerful enough to leave scars neither of them could escape later on. Success came slowly at first, then all at once. By 1964, Marvin Gaye was no longer the shy newcomer standing quietly in Berry Gordy's living room. He was Motown's rising star, the voice that blended tenderness with strength, elegance with pain. His songs began charting one after another, shaping the sound of a new generation. How sweet it is. I'll be doggone. Ain't that peculiar? His voice drifted through radios, diners, dance halls. America began to recognize him. And wherever Marvin went, Anna Gordy was close behind. Elegant, composed, understated, standing just outside the spotlight, but never fully removed from it. Their love in these early years was bright, productive, rhythmic, like two musicians playing toward the same melody. Marvin poured his feelings into his writing. Anna offered insight, refinement, and the kind of emotional intelligence that came from experience. She suggested themes. She shaped melodies. She listened intently, pointing out where the feeling sounded true and where it fell flat. Marvin once admitted that the songs he crafted in those years were inseparable from the woman he loved. But the success that lifted him also began to shift the balance between them. When they married in 1963, Marvin was 24 and still building his career. Anna was 41, already established in the music business and deeply connected inside Motown. She had influence. She had a name. For a time, that difference didn't matter. Marvin admired her strength. Anna admired his talent. But fame has a way of rearranging everything. As Marvin rose higher, he stepped into a world where thousands adored him. Young women screamed his name at concerts. Magazine covers framed him as a romantic icon. Motown executives pushed him into duets with Mary Wells, Kim Weston, and later Tammy Terrell, pairings designed to amplify his appeal. And while Marvin played the role perfectly, Anna watched from the shadows. She never said it aloud, but she felt the shift. He was becoming the golden face of Motown. She was becoming the elegant figure standing beside him, still respected, still influential, but no longer the one holding all the power. For the first time, she felt the ground move beneath her. And Marvin felt it too. Power, age, fame, three forces pulling at them, quietly, steadily. Their home life reflected both the beauty and fragility of their love. They bought a house in Detroit. They entertained guests. They attended events. In photographs, they looked balanced, creative equals, bound by partnership and ambition. But inside the house, small fractures were forming. Anna, used to leading, sometimes slipped into control. Marvin, sensitive and searching for emotional grounding, sometimes bristled at her guidance. Anna wanted efficiency. Marvin wanted empathy. Anna's strength sometimes felt like pressure. Marvin's vulnerability sometimes felt like weakness. Their differences were no longer poetic. They were practical. And practical differences are harder to ignore. Then came the issue that neither of them could escape. Children. Anna was in her 40s, graceful, healthy, but biologically facing limits. Marvin longed to be a father. The tension grew quietly, painfully. Their conversations about children were tender at first, then cautious, then strained. In 1966, they announced the arrival of a baby boy, Marvin Gaye III. But the story the public believed was not the full truth. The child was born to Anna Gordy, Anna's niece, and adopted by the couple. The decision, though made with love, carried complexity. It was a secret held behind closed doors, a silent reminder of the imbalance forming between desire and reality. For a time, the baby brought joy. Marvin adored him. Anna embraced motherhood with devotion. The little boy softened the edges of their marriage. But a child cannot heal fractures that come from deeper places. As Marvin's fame grew, so did the whispers. Rumors of flirtation. Rumors of temptation. Rumors that followed him from studio to backstage corridors. Marvin denied them all. He insisted his collaborations were professional, nothing more. But Anna, seasoned in the music industry, knew the atmosphere surrounding rising stars. She had watched artists before him lose balance, lose clarity, lose themselves. And she knew Marvin's heart, how easily it could be swayed by affection, admiration, or emotional chemistry. In 1967, Marvin recorded a song that seemed to speak directly to his internal fears. I heard it through the grapevine. A song about doubts, about whispers, about learning truths you never wanted to know. The world heard a hit. Anna heard a message. Meanwhile, the rhythm of their marriage, the love, the creativity, the passion, began to stutter. The moments of connection became shorter. The pauses between conversations became longer. Marvin's insecurities resurfaced. Anna's patience thinned. They still loved each other deeply, but love alone was no longer enough to silence what they both sensed, the beginning of a divide. Work pulled Marvin further into the orbit of Motown. His voice was everywhere. His persona grew larger. And with each new success, the space between him and Anna stretched just a little more. At public events, they still looked polished. At home, they sometimes drifted through rooms without speaking. In the studio, Marvin found release. At home, he found uncertainty. Their golden years were not a lie. They were real. But they were also fragile. The beauty existed. The love existed. The music existed. Yet beneath the surface, the first cracks appeared like faint lines under varnish. By the end of the decade, the signs were unmistakable. Little silences. Lingering doubts, old wounds resurfacing at the worst moments. And though neither of them said it out loud, both felt the shift. The silence between them was growing. Growing long enough to echo. Growing long enough to warn. It was the kind of silence that comes before a storm. The golden rhythm of their marriage did not shatter all at once. It fractured slowly, quietly, like a hairline crack spreading across glass. And then, in one decisive moment, it broke. The breaking began in the summer of 1967. Motown was glowing. Stages were bright. Every room filled with sound, ambition, and expectation. Marvin, already restless beneath his rising fame, was searching for something he couldn't name. Comfort, clarity, escape, or simply someone who understood the weight he carried. Then she appeared. Tammy Terrell. Young, radiant, open-hearted. She had a smile that felt like a window letting light into a room that had been dim for too long. And she carried her own shadows, wounds, fears, and a past marked by complicated relationships. Their first duet, Ain't No Mountain High Enough, sounded effortless. Their voices wrapped around each other with a softness that felt both innocent and profound. Audiences heard chemistry. Marvin felt connection. Not romantic, he insisted. Not forbidden. Something gentler, more instinctive, a bond rooted in shared vulnerability. But Anna saw what the world saw. Two young voices blending perfectly. Two people laughing in hallways. Two souls finding calm in each other's presence. And she felt the quiet sting of becoming an outsider in her own marriage. Marvin denied every whisper. He said Tammy was like a sister, someone who needed protection, not pursuit. And perhaps that was true. But truth does not always soothe. Sometimes, it deepens the wound. As Marvin spent more time in the studio with Tammy, Anna withdrew. She stopped attending rehearsals. She stopped asking questions. Silence became her shield. And in that silence, Marvin drifted further. Then came the night everything shifted. October 1967, in Virginia. A concert stage. Bright lights. A love song. And Tammy Terrell collapsing in Marvin's arms before thousands of witnesses. The moment froze him. The world blurred. The music stopped. Doctors soon revealed the diagnosis, a brain tumor. And with those words, something inside Marvin cracked open. Guilt. Fear. Helplessness. A deep sadness he didn't yet know how to hold. He could no longer sing love songs. He canceled tours. He retreated from the world. At home, the distance between him and Anna widened. Not in anger, but in emptiness. She reached out, but he barely felt her hand. He lived inside his thoughts, replaying the fall, imagining alternate futures, wondering whether he could have protected Tammy sooner. Then the outside world added its own weight. Political tension, social unrest, cities burning, voices demanding justice. Marvin, already fragile, absorbed it all. He felt everything with a depth that was sometimes unbearable. Depression seeped in like fog. First quiet, then heavy, finally suffocating. The man who once charmed rooms now avoided them. The voice that lifted millions now struggled to sing. The performer who lit up stages now pulled curtains closed. And with despair came escape. Subtle at first, restlessness, sleepless nights, bursts of anxiety. Then darker. He turned to substances that dulled the ache for a moment, then deepened it. He moved between hope and fear, lucidity and confusion. Music became both salvation and burden. Anna watched the spiral with a grief she rarely expressed. She had once been the stable one, the woman who lifted him, steadied him, grounded him. But now he was slipping in ways she couldn't stop. He was no longer the man who arrived in Anna Gordy's house, shy and open-hearted. He was someone weighted down, someone she could no longer reach. Communication faded. Meals grew silent. Evenings felt long. Rooms felt colder. Their marriage, once built on passion and creative fire, now flickered like a candle in a draft. Some nights they spoke in short, distant sentences. Other nights, they didn't speak at all. Then the final blow arrived. March 16, 1970. Tammy Terrell passed away. Marvin broke. Completely. Quietly. Irreversibly. He didn't attend the funeral. He stayed in his room for days, barely eating, barely speaking. His world had lost a source of light, and with it went the last pieces of emotional balance he had been holding on to. His grief reshaped him. He grew a beard, changed his appearance, changed his sound. He rejected the polished image Motown had crafted. He withdrew from the mainstream. He questioned everything: identity, purpose, country, faith. From his darkest days came creative awakening. What's going on was his cry for meaning, his attempt to make sense of chaos. It was brilliance born from brokenness. But brilliance does not mend a marriage. While the world praised the album, Marvin and Anna lived like strangers. They passed each other gently, cautiously, as if both afraid of touching old wounds. Their home, once full of music and arguments and reconciliations, now echoed with distance. And then came the third person who did not bring comfort, but complication. Janice Hunter. Young, impressionable, drawn to Marvin in a way that reignited his emotions and also unsettled him. The relationship was intense, creative, and dangerous, not because of scandal, but because Marvin was vulnerable, searching for something new to anchor him. The spiral continued. Fame and pressure, love and confusion, small joys and heavy shadows. Anna stood still, watching a man she once knew change into someone completely different, someone tender, exhausted, erratic, and overwhelmed. Their conversations shortened. Their disagreements sharpened. Their hopes faded. By the mid-1970s, the emotional collapse was complete. For Marvin, life became a mixture of music, instability, and internal struggle. For Anna, it became endurance, reflection, and quiet heartbreak. Every storm has a final moment. For them, it came not with shouting, but with silence. A silence so long, so deep, that neither of them could pretend anymore. And in the silence, one truth settled. They had reached the point where love could no longer hold what life had broken. The end of a marriage rarely arrives with one decisive blow. More often, it comes like this, quiet, heavy, inevitable. By the mid-1970s, Marvin and Anna were no longer partners, no longer companions. no longer the two forces that once collided with such heat. They were two people drifting apart in the same house, separated not by walls, but by silence. The official separation came first. A document, a date, a moment that turned a private truth into a public reality. But the emotional separation had begun long before, through unanswered questions, forgotten promises, nights spent in different rooms, and wounds neither of them knew how to name. Motown felt the tension. Friends saw the distance. Photographs captured the smiles, but not the emptiness. And soon, the quiet unraveling turned into something sharper. Arguments began to spill beyond the front door. Small disagreements became heated. Old resentments resurfaced. Anna, once calm and analytical, now showed frustration that had built up over years. Marvin, sensitive and exhausted, reacted with defensiveness. They weren't shouting about the present. They were shouting about everything that had gone unsaid. Then, in November 1975, Anna Gordy filed for divorce. It was the closing chapter of a love story that had begun with impossible magnetism and survived more than anyone expected. But now, the threads had snapped. The legal battle that followed was long, painful, and deeply personal. Money became a central question. Marvin's debts were growing. His income was inconsistent. The IRS hovered in the background. His personal life was unstable. And Anna, who had once lifted him, now stood across from him as a woman seeking what she believed was rightfully hers after 12 years of marriage, sacrifice, and heartbreak. The court issued an unusual ruling, one that would change music history. Marvin Gaye was ordered to hand over the royalties from his next album to Anna. Not just a portion, a full share, estimated at hundreds of thousands of dollars. At first, Marvin resisted the idea emotionally, not legally. He felt exposed. He felt frustrated. He felt the weight of everything that had happened between them. He planned to produce a rushed record, something effortless, something empty, just enough to fulfill the settlement. But art and emotion are rarely so easily controlled. When Marvin stepped into the studio, something in him shifted. The anger, the sadness, the nostalgia, the longing. Every unresolved feeling began rising to the surface, insisting to be heard. What he thought would be a simple obligation began turning into something deeper, a confession, a confrontation, a diary written in sound. The album would be titled Here, My Dear, a name soaked in irony, an offering wrapped in bitterness. From the opening notes, it was clear this was not a traditional Motown record. It was raw. It was unpolished. It was painfully honest. Marvin reenacted their divorce papers in the first track, almost whispering the lines as if reliving the moment. He questioned their love, their lies, their good years, their failures. He didn't point fingers. He didn't spare himself. He let the music unravel both of them. Two people who had once shared a home, a child, a dream, and a future they could no longer hold. Listeners were stunned. Motown executives worried. Radio stations hesitated. Some called it too personal. Some called it inappropriate. Some didn't know what to call it at all. Anna was devastated. She had expected a marketable album, a polished record that would produce royalties, not an emotional autopsy of their marriage. Friends whispered. Reporters asked questions. People listened to songs that seemed to lift the curtain on their private life. She felt exposed, misunderstood, and deeply wounded. For a time, she considered legal action again. Not for money, for dignity. But she didn't pursue it. Not out of acceptance, out of exhaustion. Meanwhile, the album struggled. It didn't climb the charts. It didn't produce hit singles. Audiences, accustomed to Marvin's silky soul, felt unprepared for something so intimate, so bruised, so human. Here, My Dear faded quietly, without applause. Yet time has a way of reframing what the present cannot understand. Years later, critics began revisiting the album. They listened not as fans seeking hits, but as observers seeking truth. Slowly, the narrative changed. The record once dismissed as self-indulgent was now praised as courageous. What felt messy in the moment became meaningful in hindsight. They called it bold. They called it groundbreaking. Some even called it the most honest divorce album ever made. A mirror held up to love at its most fragile. And Anna, after years of distance, grief, and reflection, eventually forgave him. Not publicly, not dramatically, quietly, the way forgiveness often arrives. In the end, The album that divided them became the piece of art that preserved their story. A love story too complicated for a single lifetime, too heavy for the world to understand, but too true to disappear. Because some relationships don't end, they transform. And some masterpieces aren't created in triumph. They're created in the aftermath, when the heart, broken open, finally tells the truth. The final chapter of Marvin Gaye's life unfolded like a slow dusk, the kind that sinks without drama but leaves the sky bruised with color. The brilliance of his artistry remained, but the man behind it was fading, worn down by years of struggle, heartbreak, and the weight of a world he felt too deeply. By the late 1970s, Marvin was no longer the polished soul prince America adored. He was drifting. Financial troubles tightened around him. Debts mounted. Contracts became battles. He lived in moments, not plans. The quiet cracks of his personal life deepened into fault lines. He fled to Europe, an escape, not a journey. Belgium became his refuge, a place where the noise softened and the expectations faded. There he tried to rebuild. He jogged by the sea. He sought therapy. He tried to stay away from substances that blurred his mind. For a brief, flickering moment, it worked. He returned to music. He found a new rhythm. Midnight Love revived his career, and Sexual Healing lifted him once more to global attention. On stage, under warm lights, he looked reborn. But the rebirth was temporary. The shadows that had followed him since childhood rose again, quiet but relentless. After returning to the United States, Marvin slipped into old habits. The pressure, the fame, the loneliness, the longing for peace he could never quite reach. His paranoia deepened. He believed danger hid in every corner. He wore a bulletproof vest during rehearsals. He asked bodyguards to stand watch at all hours. To some, these were exaggerations. To Marvin, they were survival. His family tried to hold him. His friends tried to anchor him. But the storm inside him was one no one else could calm. By late 1983, he moved back into his parents' home, seeking safety, perhaps, or simply a place where he no longer had to pretend to be the version of Marvin Gaye the world expected. The return was not peaceful. His father, whose strictness had shaped Marvin's earliest fears, was still the same stern, volatile presence. Their relationship, long fragile, now sat on a razor's edge. And then came the final day, April 1st, 1984. A Sunday morning. Lights slipped through the curtains in pale streaks. The house was quiet, too quiet. A small argument began. A document. A disagreement. Words grew sharp. Footsteps grew louder. Then the moment, sudden, irreversible, like a frame of film that refuses to stop playing. A confrontation. A flash of anger. A sound that broke the stillness of the house. And then silence. A silence so heavy it felt like the world itself had stopped breathing. Marvin Gaye was gone. One day before his 45th birthday. News traveled fast. Motown staff cried. Fans held vigils. Radio stations played his songs on loop, voices trembling between tracks. America mourned not just the loss of a musician, but the loss of a man whose voice had carried their joys and their sorrows. And in Los Angeles, a woman who once shared a life with him quietly prepared to say goodbye. Anna Gordy attended the funeral without spectacle. No interviews. No press quotes. No dramatics. Just a woman standing with her son, holding her grief the way she had held her love, silently. They had not been husband and wife for years, yet in moments like this, labels felt irrelevant. There are bonds that outlive signatures. There are connections that remain even after the romance has faded. After his death, Anna disappeared from public life almost entirely. No memoirs. No documentaries. No late-in-life tell-all. She chose silence. Not to hide. Not to forget. But to honor. Some stories feel sacred enough to protect, even from the world's curiosity. In her final decades, she lived quietly in Los Angeles. Surrounded by family. Close to her son, Marvin III, a child born of complex circumstances but raised with enduring love. Her days grew gentle. Her home grew peaceful. The drama faded, replaced by small joys, familiar faces, and memories she carried with tenderness. When she passed away in 2014, at 92, tributes described her as elegant, loyal, and fiercely private. But those who knew her understood something more. She had been the keeper of a story the world could only guess at, the witness to a love that had shaped and scarred one of the greatest voices in American music. Marvin and Anna could not stay together, but they could not erase each other either. Love had bound them. Experience had changed them. Silence had defined them in the end. Some relationships do not survive the world, but they survive time. Because there are love stories too big to live through, but too true to ever fade from human memory.